In today's tutorial, skin of our desire for beginner friendly, really build upon types of starting point and as well as just or you can just style that you'll have at your disposal working in Clip Studio just given to you. So a starters, I'm just gonna show you soft be we'll just use our G pen. We'll use that for hard shadow. It's just a very soft erase. Put in a little line here. Hardness. I can really control. Are gonna fade away. Get started. Like and you know, but this we really don't need to work. Very approachable. What I like to do is I've just got first color layer right one arm. I'm gonna add a layer. Make will just be. So now what we want to do is I'm going to color drop the skin color. Then over here on my little square, I'm gonna bring it down and to the right slightly. We want it to increase the intensity of the color a little bit. So we're just gonna bring it over to the right. We don't want it to be super white and grayed out or anything. Then from there, where I can actually select, you know, the red, blue, green value of it, I'm going to just slightly bring it closer to red, very slightly. We don't want it to be a super bold difference, but this will be our base for shading. So what we're going to do is you want to get a relatively large airbrush to begin with, and we just want to carefully add in some shadow here at the neck. And you can notice that, you know, if I zoom in here and I make this layer visible and not, you can see it's very, very slight. We do not want to use any harsh sort of differences in colors just yet. So I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. I'm going to put some shadow kind of at the elbow here and into the pit. I'm going to kind of put some in here at the base of the chest. And again, use a large airbrush just so that way the dispersion is a little bit nicer. It'll fade away better, look a little more natural, won't just be so intense. I'm going to put some down here in between the legs, like so. There. So now we've got just a super, super soft shadow on our character. So now I'm going to make a new layer. I'm just going to come up to the head so I can color drop the original skin color. And from there, I'm now just going to come up to our areas that will be shined upon by light. And I'm just going to basically soften up the shadows a little bit. So places like the upper portion of our breast, the shoulders, our our collarbone. Even these little areas here on the neck. Just still super soft colors. It'll all sort of pop once we're done, but for right now you really just want to keep it nice and soft. Gonna do the same thing here on our belly. I'm not gonna get too close to the chest though, because I still want some shadow there. And right down here, gonna make this a bigger brush though. Then we'll use a very large brush just to make sure that the majority of this thigh here is lightened. And then a little bit on the other side of that one. So you're really just trying to imagine where the light is going to be shining in on your character. So those areas are going to be at the brightest. So now what we can do is I'm going to do the opposite of our shadows. So for light, I'm going to bring it over here on my colors. I'm going to come up and to the left slightly. That way it's a little bit brighter, a little more whitewashed out. And then on our little color area, I'm going to come up towards the yellow super slightly. And again, you don't want to make it too intense because then it'll look very jarring to just have a huge bright spot. We can add in colors and stuff like that later, but for right now we're just trying to basically assign the light and dark value of our character. So again, with a super light brush, I'm just going to add in on our character areas where the light is going to be touching. So I don't want to add this brush everywhere that we added just the plain skin color, just because this is solely trying to add some value just so where the light is actually shining. So a little bit on the shoulders, upper chest, a little bit on the stomach area here, and then a decent amount on the thighs. On this thigh that's pointing away from us, I'm trying to keep it out to the edges. I don't want to bring it in here because that's where all of our shadow is. But then on this thigh closest to us, we can cover the thigh a bit more in it. So now again, if I mess with my being able to see this layer or not, it's just super slight and fine. Now I'm going to come over to my softening eraser, and I'm just going to tighten things up in areas that I don't want to have light value. So kind of in this nook here, under the chest, very outside of the stomach wall here. Make sure that the inside portion here of the thighs aren't quite so bright. I'm going to soften up this belly area. There. So now from there, we've basically got just super light shading and lighting on our character. So you can kind of go in whatever order you best like. If you want to go for some more harsh, hardened light, you can do that. I like to just jump straight to the hard shadows first, just because it helps me visualize where my light should be a little bit better. So we're going to make a new layer and clip it to the layer below, but this time we're going to select a multiply layer. So you want to use a multiply layer here, because otherwise, if you were to just, let's say we use a normal layer like this, and I sweep across here, I guess let me use a darker color so you can actually see. So if I swipe across here, we just see this color that I put in. You're not going to see any difference beneath it. Whereas if I switch to a multiply layer, one is going to darken it even more and give it a little bit more opacity, as well as mess with the actual red, green, blue ratio a little bit. It'll make it seem more like an actual shadow. It'll also show us any different shades and things like that beneath it. So anywhere that we've kind of textured and used brushes like that on, that'll still be visible under this shadow. So it's a lot better for making like actual cast shadows. So I'm going to use that for my hard shadows. And I'm just going to select the color we used for our initial shadows. That way it's a little bit darker, but it's not going to be so crazy that it's almost jarring to look at. And so now using my G pen, I'm just going to put a little bit of shadow here under the chin. I don't want a ton right there. Just kind of bring it down to a point. Next, I will come over here to the arm. Just right at the base, right there. From there, I can come over here to the breast. Just sort of trace out right underneath, like so. Same right there. Then kind of following this tummy line. I'll round this off a little bit so it's a little bit nicer. Add in our shadow like so. Probably could bring this up a little bit. Because right now I'm just sketching out the areas here that I want to use my little paint bucket tool to fill in the little shadows. There's no point to do this all with just the brush, you know. And then from here, we'll add a little bit of shadow in between the thighs. And then some shadow here up at the hand. Do this. Get the bottom parts of our knuckles. Like so. Then I'm just going to use my little paint bucket. Fill these in. Make sure everything is nice looking. Sometimes it'll miss a couple dots and then it looks weird, so just make sure these are all filled in. And depending on, you know, the harshness of the light or what time of day it is, your character can have more or less shadows. For this particular tutorial, we're just looking at pretty soft, neutral lighting, so we don't want anything that's just super crazy. You can mess around with that later, and I'll do some more tutorials that will kind of cover harder, more visual looking lighting, and we can add in some more color and just make it look a little bit better. But for right now, basically just a neutral sort of anime style of shading that is pretty easy to grasp, pretty easy to practice, and should hopefully just help you to get a good start. Alright, so I like to add just a tiny bit of shadow right under the nook of the collarbone as well. Kind of gives it a little bit of depth. You don't have to do that though, but I like doing that, so there we go. So now from there, I'm going to come over to my softening brush, and I'm just going to gently soften up portions of the shadow. So basically, like right in here where I'm hovering over, if you see this, this can remain rather dark because it's mostly covered away in the pit here. But areas like this where it's fading away back to the skin, you know, we have more light up here casting down on it. The shadow doesn't have to be quite as intense. So we're just going to lighten it up slightly. We don't want to overwork it, because if we do like this, then suddenly it doesn't really look like a cast shadow. You know, maybe if it's a super bright picture, then you can do that. But for this, we want to leave it visible, but we just don't want to overwork it, okay? So now I'm going to come to the layer right below my multiply layer. I'm just going to add another one. This should automatically clip to the layer below if you're on Clip Studio Paint. And this is the layer that we'll use for harsh light. So I'm going to select right here. This little area on our breast should be the brightest portion of our character. Then I'm going to come up again towards the whiter value of our color dropper over here, and then a little bit towards the yellow on the red, blue, green value. That'll give it a sense of being brighter and warmer, you know, like the sun is shining on them or something. Then we're going to come over to our lighting. Now we don't want to overwork this part. We just want to barely scratch in areas where the light is shining the brightest. So areas like the thighs, we can put in a rather large spot. Upper chest, kind of up here on the shoulders. And then I'll do a couple passes here, the collar, and a little bit here on our little necklines. Okay, so now we can then use our softening brush, and we can soften anything where maybe the lighting got away from ourselves a bit. Like so. I'm gonna darken everything up a little bit right there. A bit better. Because again, we don't want to make anything too harsh on our character here. We want to keep it pretty neutral. Something like that. So then we can add some hard lighting. So we'll come way up towards the white, a little bit more towards the yellow again. Then I like to use just the hard shadow brush. You should have a brush similar to that. It's just came with Clip Studio Paint, so it's the one that I like to use for hard lighting. Just because it's a little bit more see-through than just using a G pen. So the G pen is really great for shadows in my opinion, for like cast shadows, but for light spots, I like just using this. And we just want to capture the areas that have the most light on them. So you could also add little sun spots, let's say. So, I could put little areas right here where it's very bright. Right here on the shoulders, just kind of outlining it like so. You could use a little bit larger of a brush and you could add in some sort of shine right there on the chest if you wanted, or you can just sort of outline it, whatever you want. We could do the same thing here on the belly, here on his hip, and I'm going to add a line here on the thigh. And I'm going to kind of break it up so it's not quite so just linear. And then from there, so basically if the lighting is up here above our character, everything furthest away from it, we're basically just going to soften like so. Because we want these to be hard light, but we don't want it to be so visible that it's jarring, because our character isn't like shiny or anything. If they were like just getting out of the shower or something, then yeah, you could kind of make them look a little bit shiny, and then you could really mess with the hard lighting like this, but for all intents and purposes, we're not trying to make this character look all shiny. We just want a couple of places where the light is a little bit more visible. So I'm even going to lower the opacity of this layer to 80, so that way it's just a little tiny flecks. Alright, so from there, I'm just going to check over everything here. So I feel like if we come here, I grab this, I'm going to just darken up the area right below, kind of where some of the belly fat is stored. That way it gives it just a little bit more depth. Because right now it just looks a little too washed. Doesn't look like... It basically right now just looks like the belly fat portion is the same sort of protrusion as our portion right here in between the thighs. So I'm just going to soften that up just a bit. There we go. You think of it like anywhere that's sticking out and closer to the light, you can make that a little bit darker than the areas that are kind of tucked in or beneath it. So we'll do that there. I am going to grab one of these lighter layers here, and I'm just going to add a little brightness to the hand. Just very, very slightly though, nothing crazy. And then from there, we can shade up this next portion. So again, I'm just going to grab the darkest portion of our character. It should be right there. So yeah, I'll grab down here at the elbow. And this hand over here, since it's just mostly behind my character, I'm trying to give it a little bit of like depth perception here. So I'm going to darken this a little bit more. I'm not going to go too crazy though, just because we do have light casting from this area. So there's going to be parts of this arm that are in the light. But I still want to make sure that I'm making it feel like it is kind of away from us. It'll be just slightly darker. From there, again, our character doesn't have a face. I'm going to do a face tutorial at some point, just like a just a couple different styles of faces. So because this one doesn't have like hair or anything, we're just gonna basically shade this as if it's just a bald person. So just like before, we just used a slight shading, trying to keep everything pretty light. Then we'll use a skin colored layer just to tighten up areas. Like here on the ear, that wouldn't necessarily be shaded. But we want to make sure that usually when we're working, when we're not trying to be precise, you want just usually the bigger the better, honestly. The smaller you use for trying to capture some of these shadows, it just makes it look like stripey. So like if I went like super intense and did this, it doesn't look appealing when you do that. Whereas if you were to use like a larger one and kind of fade off like this, it sort of just blends itself, right? So you want it, the bigger you can go, the better. And then just use a smaller brush for like little tiny details. So anyways, I'm gonna grab this head color again. Just gonna make sure that the arm there is a little bit lightened up. Then we can grab a slightly lighter color yet again. I'll shade. So back towards the white. That's a little too much. A little towards the yellow and our red, blue, green value. And then from there we want to use a nice large airbrush and just super softly put in little lighting. And so see, I'm using a super small one for my little ear detail. I use a small one as well, just right up on top of the nose. And what I would recommend for the face especially, and I think this is especially true even especially for beginners, but you really want to try to keep the head pretty simple in terms of your shading. As you advance more as an artist, you can kind of learn what you get away with and such, but I feel like it can get very overcrowded very quickly if you put too much casting lights and shadows there. So as you're learning, I would recommend just keep it kind of simple for now, at least for the face. I find that what I think my best fan arts are the ones where usually it's just pretty simple shadow and just relying mostly on kind of just a blank canvas for the face. Because then as long as you get the curves and the eyes and like features like the nose right, then it will make the character look pretty nice. Alright, so we've got all that. So now I'm going to make a multiply layer. Grab this dark area here. And then, again, just not a whole lot of shadow. When we do a face tutorial, and we'll go through rendering that, then we can actually get a little more detailed here. But for this, just super simple shadows here on the head. Then up here on the arm, same thing. We're going to add a bit bigger of a shadow here, though, just because I want to give this the impression that it's kind of away from us and in the background here. Like so. I also didn't add any fingernails on my character here, so you can always add those in yourself, but I'm just trying to do a very simple skin shading tutorial. So again, try to keep the shadow darkest the further it is away from the light. So this part right here is kind of in the nook of her arm here, her little elbow joint's kind of back behind her. So I'm keeping it relatively dark the closer to the body, but then as it comes out here to the light, you can soften it up a little bit more, so that way it kind of blends itself a little bit better. Then from there, I'm just gonna come up to the ear. You can certainly use air brushes and stuff if you want in your ear. You can really like mess around with it, but I find that I like just doing a multiply layer like so, and just sort of adding a little bit of a shadow value here, and then soften it up. It keeps it pretty simple, and then if you want, just underneath that multiply layer, we can grab slightly brighter color here with a little bit of a brush, so that way it adds just a little bit of depth out further from that shadow. But yeah, that's pretty much it. again, this is just supposed to be a very simple rendering method, you know, for as you develop and grow as an artist, you can start throwing in more color layers, and you can start messing with colored light, you know, like if it's night and they're in the moonlight, it's not just a yellow warm light, it's going to be a blue sort of colder sensation. So you can really mess with that, with the color values going on there. You can add pops of colors. You can add, you know, areas that are a little bit more pink. Like for example, we could actually just real quick, if we come back to our face here, above everything, we could actually add in a little bit of blush. So same thing, I'm just going to come up to a super soft airbrush here. This time I'm coming to quite a red value. I don't want to be super deep dark red or anything, you still want to keep it rather light. And then just add a little bit like so, and soften it up. You can make your character super blushed if you want, or just a little bit, but I've kind of been slowly but surely preferring just a softer blush, just so it shows that, you know, there's some blood in the cheeks and stuff, but we're not trying to make her look like she's going crazy over here. And then I just come up against that hard shadow brush, make it real tiny. I'm at 10 right now for my brush size. And then I'm just gonna really gently add in these lines, which are pretty common when you see like anime blush. And then I'll just lower the opacity of that. So, and if you find ever that you've made it a little bit too soft, what you can do is you can come up to your lasso tool and you can just copy and paste the layer. So see right away that made the blush way brighter. So now if we look at our overall blush here, I'll combine these two layers. So now my overall blush is a lot brighter. And then from there you can kind of mess with the opacity. So if you ever make it too low of an opacity with like your eraser tool, you can just kind of duplicate it a couple times, snap it all together, and then you can mess with it from there. And then I will come over here and grab our super harsh light and add a little dot here on the nose, as well as over here on the cheek, and then soften. There we go. Alright, now it is complete. As soon as I was walking through like everything that we had done, I realized that I just didn't even put blush in it. So anyway, so that's how you would do a sort of simple, soft blush. Again, you can really mess with it. You can make it heavier in the cheeks and everything, but again, I find that sometimes if you go too heavy on the blush, it'll make the picture look a little jarring. So again, this is just a sort of simple, blendable, learnable rendering method for your skin that can be built upon later. But I think this is a pretty good starting spot. So yeah, I'm going to go through a couple different skin colors, so I'll do a couple more videos on that later, so be on the lookout for those. They all use the same exact sort of tools and methods, but it'll be good just so you can see the different shades sort of in play. Kind of try to look for something there, but either way, that'll be all for right now. Hopefully you found this helpful. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Let me know what I can improve upon. Again, just keep in mind this is a beginner tutorial here, so it's not really gonna blow anyone away, but it should be good to help you practice and get better at rendering in the first place. So I will see you in the next one. See ya.